Today at the Playback Mansion via Riverside.fm is my good friend Ed Homewood. You may know him as Old Guy Hifi. And I'm going to start out today. We've talked in the past about you grew up in a hi-fi household. And if I remember correctly, you had a Marantz 2B.
No, it was the 9 pre, 8 mono, excuse me,
Oh, the 8B.
the 8P, 10B tuner, and the matching preamplifier, which I think was either a 7 or a 9. I'm getting
Okay.
old and I don't remember, but then that was my dad's system, and he had it hooked up to a pair of Klipsch K-horns, and he got unfinished K-horns because it saved $150. And of course, back in
Wow.
1965, that was a significant amount of money. My mom hated those things, so he traded them for a JBL Paragon, which if you've ever seen one, is like a buffet a sideboard.
Oh, yeah. Those are
Huge,
beautiful.
giant thing. Yeah, she liked that better.
Did you prefer the K-horns?
No, I can't stand the sound of horns at all.
Okay.
I think those ruined them for me because after the Paragon, he had a pair of JBL Hartsfields. So yeah, I had a lot of horns early in my life, and you know what? I'm okay not listening to horns these days. So
Fair enough, yeah. The reason I bring that up is because a lot of YouTubers, we don't really have an opportunity to talk about our backgrounds when we
Right.
on our shows because there's just no context for it. Well, this is the context. So another thing I'd like to touch on is you actually knew Dr. Harman of Harman Kardon. Maybe you
I
could tell
did.
me how that happened and a little bit about him.
Well, we had retail stores here in Chicago, and we were big Harman Kardon dealers. And of course, in those days, back in the 80s, we had two CES shows every year. We had the Summer CES here in Chicago, and then we had Winter CES in Las Vegas. And Summer CES was the buying show because obviously you're loading in for the holiday season, where with Winter CES, it's already after the holiday season. I never understood why they didn't make it a summer show anyway. So we'd do a ton of business at that show. And there were many occasions when we would be meeting with the senior management staff at Harman Kardon, looking at the year's new products and everything else, and making purchase arrangements for product for the holidays and new product launches and all that kind of stuff. And so I got to meet Dr. Harman that way and had dinner with him on several occasions. Then for a period of time, I actually worked at Harman. And so I knew Dr. Harman on a professional level. And then after that, I was actually a manufacturer's rep for Harman products. And again, I saw Dr. Harman all the time there. So I knew him professionally and socially. One of the things that Dr. Harman used to do that was really, really nice, even after I had no more involvement with him, if he was ever in town, he was very philanthropic. Dr. Harman is a doctor not in electrical engineering or anything like that. His PhD is in labor relations. And he's very progressive. Back in the 60s, if you worked for Harman at the factory in Woodbury, New York, and you had kids and you needed to get them to a doctor, of course, on Long Island, no one has cars because everybody takes, mass transit. He would arrange a car to come and pick you up, take your child to the doctor, and bring you back to work. And they had daycare at the facility back in the 60s. He was very progressive. As a matter of fact, many of his labor theories are still being taught at business schools these days. Harvard is one of them that uses a lot of his stuff. So very interesting guy, very philanthropic guy. He was also Undersecretary of Commerce for Jimmy Carter's administration.
Wow.
So interesting guy. But whenever he'd come to town, they'd always be doing something philanthropic. He, would sponsor, a good example would be like Wynton Marsalis done at Symphony Hall. They'd have a concert, raise money, or they would do an event and it would feature young performers, and Wynton Marsalis would kind of tutor him and give him that kind of stuff. So every time he was in town, his admin would give me a call and say, Dr. Harman's going to be in town. We got tickets waiting for you. He wants to meet you here for dinner, and so forth and so on. So we got to hang out even after I wasn't directly involved anymore with the company. He was a really great guy and a bit of a mentor for me. So a really fascinating guy. And I'll be doing an entire video on kind of the history of Harman and Dr. Harman and some of his philosophies and things like that.
Yeah, and just so for people who don't know, he was involved in stereo recording all the way back in the 30s, and eventually teamed up with Kardon to start his own thing.
Right. He was in the Signals Corps in the Army during World War II. And so he was exposed to radio communications and things like that. And when he got out of the service, he joined the David Bogan Company in New York, and Bogan's still in business. And Bernie Kardon was his boss. And they kind of got tired of Bogan not wanting to do anything different. And I will vouch for the fact that Bogan hasn't changed much in the last 70 years anyway. And it was kind of background music systems, things like that. So they started Harman Kardon. And of course, the two of those knuckleheads invented the receiver.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, they put the first box together that had a preamp, amp, and tuner all in one box. It was called the Festival. And then they came out with the very first stereo receiver. And the funny thing about that, Ryan, was the left channel was on FM, the right channel was on AM, because they hadn't figured out how to multiplex a stereo signal onto a frequency modulated FM carrier. They later did, and then of course we got FM stereo. But yeah, interesting stuff. It was the first company to have Dolby noise reduction. He would say his goal was to go from the performer's lips to the consumer's ear, and he did at one point owned everything in the chain, from the microphone the singer sang into to the speakers and the electronics you were listening to at home.
Wow.
So he is probably one of the goats in hi-fi.
Yeah, that's really fascinating stuff, and it's stuff that you can't just hear. You just can't read anywhere. It's really interesting to have somebody's personal experience with them.
Yeah,
at least
it's kind of fun.
To me.
Yeah, I find it interesting too, and I'll be, like I said, I'll be doing a history of Harman and Dr. Harman. A video soon. It's been written. I wrote it a year ago. I just got to sit down and do it.
Well, this might be a good teaser for that. All right. Then the other thing I wanted to get to is, my questions disappeared. Okay.
No problem.
So I'm going to shift gears a little bit because we are in the reviewer space. There are a lot of people right now that maybe they live in a rural area, or the stores near them, the brick and mortar stores have closed down, and so they have very limited experience with gear. How would a person who really is fresh at getting into it predict what kind of gear they're going to like?
That's a tough one, because unless you have some previous experience with it, and you kind of have developed a taste. Maybe it was a system you had years ago and you got away from it because kids and wife and family and, or spouse, all kind of got intervened, and now you've been listening on a sound bar and you want to do something different. It is a real challenge. The tough thing is to understand what it is you're looking for in the sonic performance of any piece of gear. And I will say right up front, don't worry about specifications, wattage, the way it looks. None of that stuff matters if it doesn't sound good, right?
Yes.
So sound is the most important part of any piece of audio gear. And I am an advocate of source first. To me, the very first link of the chain needs to be the strongest, or, it's the old garbage in, garbage out kind of concept. And I will tell you that a moderate pair of speakers will scale immensely, and I do it all the time. I have a pair of pretty standard Wharfdale Diamond 12.4 tower speakers that I've run on $30,000 monoblock amplifiers, and guess what? They sounded absolutely wonderful, and they rose to the occasion. So you don't need to spend a ton of money on anything, but start with the first link of the chain and focus on that. Now, how do you get a chance to hear some of this stuff? I mean, you can go to trade shows. You and I do that, and do we really get a chance to hear it properly? No. It's a room full of people. It's a noisy environment. It's a hotel room, so everything's jammed into one little room. Maybe if you've got an acquaintance or a friend that has a hi-fi, go listen to them and see what you're hearing and make some notes. Does it sound sharp? Is it too bright? Are the high frequencies kind of grating? Do they make you want to turn the volume down? Do you wish it had a little more bass? Has it got too much bass? Does the singer's voice sound natural, like someone speaking to you in the room? I mean, you'll never recreate live music in your home ever, no matter what happens, unless you pick up a guitar and play it yourself.
Yeah.
So what you want to do is kind of suss out what your particular preference in sound is, and everyone's individual. Once you kind of get a feel for that, then you can start. Maybe there are some YouTube reviewers that are saying things that sound good to you. Maybe you watch one of my reviews, and I'm Mr. Smooth and Warm. I want things to be very smooth, detailed, but I prefer a warm sound rather than a sharp sound. I find that, I listen. I'm retired. I listen for hours and hours every day. Of course, I've got tons of stuff to review, so I do have to listen to it. But I don't want to have that sense of, I got to go turn it down. That's listening fatigue, and that's one of the things you have to really be careful with. Even if you're just getting started, a great way to start is try some headphones. Get a nice little headphone rig. You don't need to spend a ton of money on one of those. You can use your phone. You can go to an outboard little digital analog converter with a little amplifier in it to drive a full-size set of headphones if you want to. Try that. Headphones, it's a very inexpensive way to get started. You can get a really nice pair of headphones for $150. You can get a really nice little headphone DAC amp for probably about the same, $150. And start there and see what you think. Now, if you're using like Tidal, or I don't know so much with Qobuz, but Tidal and Spotify actually have an equalizer built in. Play with the EQ settings and figure out where your sound is. Are you boosting the bass? Are you cutting the highs? Are you boosting the highs? Kind of get a sense of all right, that's kind of how I like the sound. And if you look at that curve, that'll kind of give you an indication of where your particular tastes lie. And now you can start researching products based on that equalizer setting. All right, I like a little more high frequencies. You might like a speaker with a metal dome tweeter. I like it much smoother. You might like a cloth dome tweeter. I like a lot of bass. You might want a bigger woofer than a smaller woofer, or a pair of woofers rather than a single woofer. Or, and I always recommend this, as you progress and as your system matures and as you mature as a listener, yeah, you're going to want to add a subwoofer. A subwoofer, even with the best speakers in the world, makes a big difference to kind of flesh out that bottom end. Then once you get the headphone thing and you got a sense for your sound, then you can start making some maybe choices on products that you want to listen to or try out. You will find that there's a lot of good stuff coming out of Asia these days, kind of in what I call the fun-fi category. And you can get started on something like that very inexpensively. The trick then is when it comes to the fun-fi stuff, I'll tell you what, under $500, it's interchangeable. They all sound decent, good, fine. They all use the same basic technologies. It is Asia incorporated after all, so everybody shares a lot of stuff. But there's a good way to start. You can get yourself a nice little, Class D integrated amplifier for $150. Add a nice little pair of bookshelf speakers for maybe a couple of $300. Get an integrated amplifier that's got a DAC built into it, and then stream from your PC, stream from your phone, stream from your tablet. You could do it via Bluetooth if you want to. That's a good way to get started. And then again, you can kind of discover what your sound is. If you are going to buy full-size equipment and really go into it, deal with a retailer that you have the option to return stuff. Amazon's good, but their brands are very limited as far as what they have available. You're going to kind of get the mass market products like Pioneer and Sony and Onkyo and, those kinds of things. Or deal with a direct manufacturer. Many manufacturers are doing the direct-to-consumer methodology, and that actually benefits you a lot because you're not paying a dealer markup, although a good dealer can be really valuable, especially if you're going to go really in full bore and you're going to spend a lot of money. Deal with a dealer. Don't deal with someone online. But make sure they got a good liberal return policy. Crutchfield's a great one. If you tell Crutchfield, listen, I want to try these two, this Marantz piece and this Yamaha piece. Do you have open box units you can send me? Because I'm going to return one of them. And open box is a great way to save money. There's usually nothing wrong at all. I'm going to return one of them. If you tell them up front, they're fine. They understand. I mean, they have a liberal return policy. But also, too, if you're saying, give me an open box piece, that's not a brand new unit that they're going to get back as an open box and can't sell for new.
That's a good point.
Open box, B stock, quote unquote B stock. B stock usually means just open box most of the time. Doesn't mean it was necessarily repaired. But you can go on Amazon or not on Amazon, and eBay. I think Cambridge still does. Cambridge Audio had an eBay store where they sold their open box goods, and you could save a ton of money. So there are different ways to do it, and it does take some effort on you as a consumer and a listener's part, because you can't just get it. If you're waiting for somebody to spoon feed you all of the information, you're never going to make a good decision. You really got to use your own ears. And again, and I'll steal this line from another YouTube reviewer. The only person in the world that has to be happy with the sound of the system is you, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what anybody else says. It doesn't matter if you like, if I review a pair of speakers that I hate, but you love them, well, then you love them. That's the right speaker. I always say the best the best speaker in the world is the one you like, period. It doesn't matter what anybody else thinks, maybe other than your spouse.
Right, that's true.
You have to make sure
there
that
has to be some compromise.
yeah, those big, giant, 6-foot tall Magnapans are going to be okay in the family room.
Yeah, right. Or they do you no good if you're forced to return them anyway. But you're touching on, listener fatigue and wanting to turn it down. And I'd encourage people if you're not listening to your stereo, then it's even if everybody online tells you it's the best thing since sliced bread, it's okay to return it. It's okay to move on. Don't force yourself to listen. You should feel drawn to listen. Like when you hear a new song, if you don't think, oh boy, I wonder what that sounds like at my house, then maybe you haven't quite gotten to that point yet with your stereo where you're actually looking forward to listening to it. And just you get tons of great information on the forums and on Facebook and YouTube, but like Ed was saying, it only matters if you enjoy it. And I have a background in psychology. The only way to really know about how you feel about something is to look at patterns of behavior over time. So if you notice yourself listening to the stereo after you buy a new component less than you did in the past, then maybe question that maybe that new component isn't as good as it was cut out to be. And it's not even as good or as bad. It's just maybe not as synergistic with that system and that room and with your genres and with your mood and all that other kind of stuff.
You touched on something really important, synergy. So finish your thought, and I'll chime in on that.
But regardless, if you're not listening to it, you probably don't like it that much. So rethink and trace it back to when you were listening to it a lot. What was different then, and what common things can you find in other gear that you're looking at?
Right. And if you have a system that you're currently satisfied with, avoid the FOMO, right?
Oh,
you
it's
don't
so
have
hard.
to go buy new gear. Here's my thing, and this has always been true of me. I didn't get interested in hi-fi because I like hi-fi boxes. I got interested because I love music. And I mean, honestly, my first job in the industry was in 1977 when I became one of the youngest managers in the history of the Radio Shack Corporation, because I had my own store at 17. And so I loved the music. That's what got me interested in. And how are you going to play the music? You get a hi-fi, right? You got to get some gear to do that. And then over time, I kind of understood what I liked about certain pieces of hi-fi. And yeah, I went through gear, and of course, having the 5 stores, I was exposed to tons of stuff for years, and being a manufacturer's rep and working for manufacturers, I kind of was able to figure out my own sound. At this point right now, to me, the most important portion of any component in the hi-fi system is, first of all, if you're going to make a change in your system, make one change, and don't make another change for 6-8 months if you can. Until you get used to the sound of that change, you won't know if the change was positive or negative. And I'll expand on that in just a minute. So for me, when I put, because I have a reference system and I know the sound of this particular gear, and I can plug in a new DAC, a CD player, a turntable, change the cartridge, whatever, change the cable, whatever it happens to be, and I'll know that change because I'm so familiar with the rest of the chain. When I put that in, if that piece of gear doesn't grab me by the lapels and say, come on, we're going to go play, and you're going to go digging deep into your library of music, that to me is a wonderful piece. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what color it is. I don't care what kind of features it has. If it says, come play with me, and I'm sitting there and I go, oh my God, it's been 4 hours?
Yes.
That to me is the perfect piece of gear.
Or if you don't want to turn it off and it's late at night and you know you got to get to sleep and you just
million times
you're
done
just
that.
Struggling because you just want to hear one more song. Yeah.
And you put on one of your favorite pieces of music and all of a sudden you got goosebumps. You get a physical, not only the emotional reaction, but you get that physical reaction, the goosebumps. Yeah. That is priceless. That's a priceless experience. So, as you curate your system, do it slowly, methodically. Only make one change at a time. Wait a long period of time until you're used to it. Now, if you've got a return policy and you put it on, you'll know right away if you like it, right? If you go, send it back. If you put it on, you go, all right, and oh my God, it's been 2 hours. All right, that's a keeper. But then don't change anything else for a long time. Get used to that sound. It's this FOMO. A lot of audiophiles are gearheads, almost more gearheads than they are audiophiles. And I see it in my comments all the time. And I have a great community, great bunch of people that watch my videos, great subscribers and channel members. But I get it a lot of times. I get these comments of, I just got finished reviewing Live Audio, just brought out a brand new piece. They announced it today. And it's a headphone amp R2R ladder DAC for $850. It's their lowest priced unit ever. I've had this for a month. I was under embargo. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't release the video until today when they made the official announcement. So I put this out, and everybody goes, well, is it better than the $2,000 one? Well, no, it's different. It's not. And that's the one thing people have to understand is there is no best. Yeah. It's what is best for you. This is an individual subjective thing. And don't worry about measurements. You don't listen to measurements. Don't worry about signal-to-noise ratio. You can't tell the difference. If we can all agree that the signal-to-noise ratio of a CD player at 96 dB is really good, who cares if it's 196 dB? You're never going to hear that difference anyway.
100%.
All right. And the other one in amplifiers always is total harmonic distortion. I will tell you right now, it doesn't matter what your total harmonic distortion on your amplifier is because every speaker in the world is 1 or 2% or greater in total harmonic distortion. So it doesn't matter. If everybody went by measurements, no one would ever own a tube amplifier. Ever.
Well, and there's different qualities of distortion depending on, what the harmonics are with the music.
Well, harmonic distortion is in sympathy with the music. The one that you got to worry about is odd order harmonic distortion, which is typically referred to as transient intermodulation distortion. And that is very audible.
Yes.
And
I don't know all the technical. You know it all.
Yeah. Well, we did an entire deep dive technically on transient intermodulation distortion at Harman. Based on the research of a Finnish scientist and electrical engineer and theorist named Dr. Matti Atola. And that's why, for years, Harman, and the brand obviously is dead at this point other than Bluetooth speakers and headphones. The mantra with Harman Kardon was ultra-wide bandwidth, high current, low negative feedback. And that was based on the result of Dr. Matti Atola. And there's a current company called Elektrokompagnie out of Denmark, I believe, that adheres to those exact same principles. And they build some amazing equipment. I've reviewed their big $30,000 monoblocks, and oh my, very good. Way out of my price range, but very good. So the things you need to focus on is, what does it sound like to you? Period.
Right. Yep.
Don't worry about specs. Don't worry about, obviously you got to worry about your budget and pricing and things like that. Maybe the size of it is important because of the space you got to put it in. But you can get started with some really nice equipment. You can put together, and I did in one of my Christmas videos, put together some systems that don't cost a lot of money, that can be very rewarding to listen to and at least get you started. And that's the thing is, if you overanalyze, you'll never get anywhere. You can't overthink this. You just jump in. All right, I got $500 I can spend on this. Get that little $500 system and see where you're at.
The suggestion for starter systems, I think, is a really great starting point because, someone like Ed has heard thousands of combinations probably. And so if you could just, if there's a YouTuber that you vibe with and you see he has these different price categories, maybe start with one of those and then you can kind of move up there from there. Don't assume that, because something's the new hotness, that if you throw them all together, it's going to sound great, because synergy is a really, it can't be overstated how important it is, and the only way to really know that is through experience, and experienced people can help you along the way with that.
Yeah, one of the things I try to include in my reviews, especially on the more premium products, I just did the review of the big Magnapan 2.7i speakers. And I talked about all the different electronics I used with it, because if you're considering that speaker, here I gave you some examples of really good synergies. But the bottom line is you can have all the synergy in the world. If you got a crappy room, the room is 70% of what you're listening to anyway. So that's a very important thing, is to consider it. Now, there's always going to be compromises based on living spaces, and maybe the room serves more than one purpose. I'm fortunate in that my room it was absolutely built 30 years ago to be nothing but a listening room. So I'm very fortunate in that, and I recognize that. So But synergy, I can't overstate it enough. But you can find synergy in even the modest systems can sound really,
Absolutely.
truly amazing. And again, you can't chase the new hotness all the time. You have to, if you're doing it, remember that companies come out with all right, company comes out with an amplifier that's 100 watts a channel. It's got 2 inputs, a volume control, and that's it. And the next version comes out, it's the same 100 watts. It's got the same volume control. The same goes in as it goes out, but it's got bass and treble controls. And then the next version that comes out, it's got a headphone jack. And the next version that comes out, it's got a built-in DAC. Do you know why they come out with all these new versions? It's the search for more money.
Yes,
They want
absolutely.
to get this, buy the new latest thing. That's,
Right.
and I never understood it. You got all the fans of iPhones waiting in line to get the next iPhone. And I think the old joke was that the S in 12S stood for same as the previous model.
Yeah,
But it's
that's
the
right.
buzz, and don't fall for the buzz. Listen to your ears, trust your ears. They will never lie to you ever. If you like the sound of something, then that's a good piece. It doesn't matter what technologies change or anything else. The biggest audiophile I know was my philosophy professor in college. And he had a very modest system. He came and bought it from our stores. He had a very modest system, but he also had a huge record collection. And he could listen to, you could put on a disc of Beethoven's Sixth Symphony, and he could tell you the conductor, the orchestra, and when it was recorded.
Wow.
Right? He didn't care about having the best amplifier, the best speakers. What he cared about was how the music sounded and what, you look at some very famous composers like Sir George Solti, did 3 complete Beethoven cycles, all 9 symphonies. And every time he did it, he reevaluated his previous version. And his last version, he said, you know what? I've been playing these too slow. I need to pick up the pace a little bit and do it. And so it's that reinterpretation of something everybody's familiar with. It adds kind of new zest to it. It adds a little extra something to it. All right, yeah, I can hear that difference. And that's an audiophile. An audiophile isn't a guy that's got a big expensive hi-fi system, because I've seen systems where, when part of my territory was in the Middle East, you land, go to see somebody and you walk through their garage with the Lamborghinis and the Ferraris and the Aston Martins and everything else, and you walk into this big giant room and there's a stack of really, really expensive couple $100,000 worth of hi-fi, and the guy goes, listen to this, and he cranks it up, turns it down, and then leaves. We go away. We go do something else because it's jewelry for them. Don't fall for that. Expensive is better. It is in many cases. Is a $10,000 receiver 10 times, or $10,000 amplifier 10 times better than a $1,000 one? No, but it is better. And it's those increments of better. You have to place the value on those as the consumer. Yes, it's worth that extra money for me to get that little marginal additional performance, right? And obviously it depends on your budget, but you can settle in and have a really nice hi-fi. Like I said, on some of my Christmas videos, I started, I think, at about $500 or thereabouts, and that could take you all the way to $50,000 because I do that all the time. But if you're just starting out, don't be afraid to try one of the little inexpensive kind of fun-fi products. You'll find that they perform quite well. And then as you develop your taste and you understand what it is you like, not what I like, not what anybody else likes, what you like, then you can move forward. And I always counsel, do incremental steps. You get these guys that, I bought this amplifier 20 years ago and I'm going to put a $10,000 pair of speakers on it. No. Reconsider. How about trying a new amplifier? Because technology's changed. And one of the things is, and I'm not a vintage hi-fi guy, although I appreciate vintage hi-fi. To me, vintage hi-fi is like a classic car. It's beautiful. They're wonderful. The designs are cool. They're nostalgic. They bring back great memories. You wouldn't want to drive one every day.
That's a good analogy.
So because of the ability of and the tolerances of manufacture these days are so much tighter. Back in the day, in the 80s, because we had a service department at the stores, you'd go in and there would be components in the big Pioneer receiver that were plus or minus 10% tolerance. Well, nowadays, in a receiver or an amplifier that costs the same, even with inflation, the tolerances are plus or minus 1%. And you get into things like digital components, they're plus and minus 0.5%. So just those tolerances alone, the ability to figure out shorter signal paths, all kinds of other stuff, those are huge improvements in the sonic quality of a product. And it doesn't cost a lot of money. To make a PC board for a $2,000 amplifier and to make a PC board for a $1,000 amplifier, exactly the same cost. Honestly, it's an incremental difference. Because I've seen the manufacturing. I've been to Asia a zillion times and seen factories where this stuff is made. And you can have one thing made on one line that's going to go out the door at $500, and one thing made on the other line, and it's like there's not a lot of difference here, and this is going out the door at $1,500. So it is, again, you take your time, curate it. Be sensitive to what it is you like. More than anything, be sensitive to what it is you like, and obviously what your budget allows. And it's not easy, but boy, is it rewarding when you get there. Even if it's a modest system and you go, oh my God, I want to listen more and more every day, then you hit you hit a home run with that one.
Yeah, my first what I consider audiophile system, it was a little Hitachi, I think it was an HA12 amp, which was just this little, probably cost $100 new or something. And then I had these NHT Super Zero speakers hooked to it, and I was just running it off my laptop. Those. And oh my gosh, I just couldn't believe these songs I was familiar with they just had so much more emotional intensity that I never experienced before.
Right.
And so, yeah, like you said, you don't have to spend a lot of money. I do want to vouch for vintage stuff real quick, specifically stuff from the 70s and stuff that was made in like the U.S. or Japan or Norway, these type of places. Because one of the great things about vintage technology is you can buy it used. I mean, it can be risky because it's not always in a great state of tune. So find a reputable seller. If you buy it used and you like it, you can keep it forever because it's easy to service that stuff because they don't have what's called surface mount devices. So you don't have to replace whole boards. You can just replace individual components. So essentially these things can last a lifetime. And the other upside is that you can resell it if it doesn't vibe with you for pretty close to what you bought it for. And then the final thing would be, style points. Unfortunately, the prices have gone up because it's kind of trendy to have vintage gear. But I will say that I've had very satisfying experiences listening to my vintage gear. Like I had this Luxman L400 or something that, sounds as good or better as many of my newer things. And the same thing with Sansui, Tandberg. There are a bunch of brands out there that, you might find audio bliss with. But, just keep all that in mind. I know it's a lot to throw at you.
The vintage stuff is wonderful, and I own a bunch of vintage stuff. My thing with the right level of product, I mean, almost all of the stuff from Cambridge Audio, Advanced Paris, any of those, not Rotel, not NAD, not Pioneer, not Marantz, almost all those kind of more boutique-y brands, it's all through-hole technology on the circuit board. So from a repair standpoint, it's just as easy.
Forever.
Yeah, it does. But I will tell you, and I've spoken to a number of engineers now, one of the advantages of SMT, or what they call surface mount technology, like on a motherboard on a computer, or they use surface mount technology on the circuit board on your cell phone, is that there are now, because of the proliferation of surface mount products, there are really high tolerance surface mount transistors, resistors, capacitors, all of those types of things. But I had an engineer tell me that in the preamp section, I can shorten the signal paths by 60% by using surface mount. And we're only talking about a max of, on a preamp at line level, 2 volts maybe. Right. And so at that point, it doesn't matter. In your amplifier, your output stage, that stuff, it's got to be through hole. It's got to be high current. It's got to be able to handle a lot of wattage and things like that. So it is becoming a blend these days. I mean, if you look at everything Shit Audio does, it's all surface mount technology. Maybe not their amplifiers. I'm not that familiar with them. But on DACs and things like that, surface mount's fine. That's all you're going to get anyway, because nobody's doing through hole on that stuff. Not anything that you can afford or I can afford. But if vintage floats your boat, go vintage. Absolutely. But also, too, you can get some modern stuff that's got a built-in DAC, got a really good phono preamps, got bass and treble controls, it's got Bluetooth, got a nice remote control, which a lot of vintage stuff lacks. So don't be afraid of either one, but go listen. If it makes you smile, that's the right stuff. Period.
That's a really great distinction you made about the preamp section, which is like your volume control, your equalizer, your
Bass
your
and
DAC
treble, switching inputs. Yeah.
yeah, all that stuff. I mean that I got my system over here, which it has the CX100 Cambridge streamer, and then that's run into like an Ellicott tube DAC, like a 300B. And so I think that's really a great way to synergize things. If you have the the modern digital front end, and then you get nice big beefy vintage or tube or whatever floats your boat, you can actually hide the digital aspect of it and then feed. And a lot of people do this. I don't know if they talk about it very much in videos. Feed a nice beefy vintage amp. And the one last thing I'll say is the only thing about room synergy that's kind of a rule of thumb is the bigger the room, the more wattage you're going to need to fill it with bass. The smaller the room, you can get away with much less. And also another thing to consider, with my old NHT speakers, I was living in an apartment, but I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor, so I could have those speakers, 2 feet from my head, and it was perfect. But those little NHT Super Zeros aren't going to fill a typical sized, living room or something like that. So there are some basic rules of thumb. My personal preference is 8-inch speakers are better, but everybody has different rules about that.
I'm a big 8-inch two-way guy.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I've got a pair of Mission 770s in here right now, and that's a big
I
8-inch
love those
two-way. Those are
speakers.
beautiful speakers. The thing with a smaller speaker, here's the thing: if you're looking at a smaller speaker, you're going to have to put it on a stand. Well, at that point, the floor space taken up by a small speaker on a stand is the equivalent of a small tower.
Yeah.
The small tower is going to give you a little better bass performance. It may, from a cosmetic standpoint, it looks finished all the way down to the floor rather than a speaker and then this metal thing and all that stuff. So from an aesthetic standpoint, you might prefer that. But again, if you're doing a speaker on a stand, there are some benefits to small speakers, but there are also some real good benefits to a moderate tower, narrow baffle, a couple of woofers instead of a single woofer. And from a cost-wise, it can be very similarly priced. So that's one thing to consider. You can put a small tower in a small room and be fine. If you're putting speakers on stands, it takes up the same floor space. So that's the other thing. I'm a big tower speaker guy. I would much rather have a larger, either an 8-inch woofer. The 770 is a giant, quote unquote, bookshelf. I mean, it isn't really, but I agree with you. Give me like two 6-inch woofers, an 8-inch woofer. 10s, I'm not so sure of. They can be a little flabby. 12s can definitely overhang. 15s are way too much. If you're going to do that, do a subwoofer and do a sealed box subwoofer. If you're going to go big driver. But that's the other thing too, is you could get a moderate pair of speakers, and if you want to, there are some really good, bunch of companies making some really good, very compact subwoofers. The challenge with those is, where do you put them? And that's a whole nother video, because you just can't stick it anywhere and have it really work properly. So we could do a whole nother video on subwoofers if you want to.
Yeah, and I know you have. And when can we look forward to that Mission 770 review? I actually own a pair, and I'm enamored with them. I really
like them a lot. As a consumer, you really have to make up your mind. You can't go by 100% by what someone else says. Try to figure out what it is you like, and then if you can find a YouTuber that has a similar sensibility and a similar taste, then maybe you could trust their judgment. But really, that's the only thing I would say, and it was something I used to say whenever I did trainings at Harman or any of the stores or any of the other audio companies I worked for, is a good hi-fi system will make you live longer. And I promise you that's true. Think about it. You come home from a shitty day at work. You just had to commute up 294 past all the construction at O'Hare, right? It took you an hour and a half to get home. You come home, and what happens? The wife is telling you everything the kids did wrong. Things went bad at the store. The low tire pressure light on her minivan came on, right? Mm-hmm. Your blood pressure's up here. You go down, put on your headphones, or sit in front of the stereo, put on a piece of music you love, 20, 30 minutes. Everything, just your blood pressure comes down, your heart rate comes down, your alpha waves get better in line. It can be one of the most rewarding, most kind of therapeutic things. Is just, if if you love music, and some people just don't like music, but if you love music, you should find a way every day for at least 20, 30 minutes. Just listen to something you really like and just think about the music, not anything else. And that's the other part is, if you're listening to music and you're doing this, yeah, put
You're
this
not
away.
listening.
Put it away. Yeah. Pay attention to the music. Because whoever wrote that piece of music's talking to you.
Yeah.
You got to figure out what they're saying to you. How do you interpret what they're saying? What does that mean to you? How does it make you feel? What's going on in your brain? Because whatever they always said, music is a universal language.
Yeah, I absolutely agree, and I think that's a wonderful way to end our conversation. Ed, thank you so much. This
Anytime,
has really
Ryan,
been fun and
that, my friend.
informative. Yeah, I appreciate it, and I'm looking forward to a lot of the reviews you have coming out. So check them out at Old Guy Hi-Fi.
Yep.
And I'll see you around.
All right, buddy. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.